the legacy, the Macaulay legacy, coupled with the special situation of Lagos being part of Yoruba land, but also as the national capital, being populated by many from other regions, now gave the NCNC a credible foothold in Lagos. Nevertheless, Azikiwe did, with British help, deliver on his primary mission of arousing and inspiring the Igbos into competition with the Yorubas. Village Improvement Union sponsored scholarships, and Igbo students flocked to secondary schools in what is now the Western region. By late 1930s, the Igbos were more heavily represented than any other tribe or nationality in Yaba Higher College and in most Nigerian secondary schools. Thenceforward, the number of Igbos appointed to the African civil service and as clerks in the business firm increased at a faster rate than that of any other group. By 1945, the gap between Yorubas and Igbos was virtually closed. Increasing numbers of Igbo barristers and doctors began to arrive from England. By 1952, the number of Igbos, 115, enrolled at University College, Ibadan, was nearly equal to the number of Yorubas, 118. But the effort came at a cost in East-West relations, which worsened progressively. By the summer of 1948, when Awolowo returned from his law studies in London, rivalry was bordering on conflict. We were bunched together by the British, who named us Nigeria. We never knew the Igbos, but since we came to know them, we have tried to be friendly and neighborly. Then came the arch-devil to sow the seeds of distrust and hatred. We have tolerated enough from a class of Igbos and adu-brained Yorubas who have mortgaged their thinking caps to Azikiwe and his hirelings, Awolowo said. The rejoinder from the Igbos through Azikiwe's West African pilot was no less guttural. Azikiwe responded, henceforth, the cry must be one of battle against Egbe Omodudua, his leaders at home and abroad, uphill and down Dale in the street of Nigeria and in the residence of his advocates. It is the enemy of Nigeria. It must be crushed to the earth. There is no going back until the fascist organization of Sir Adeyemo has been dismembered. The climax of Azikiwe's progress was in his 1949 address, following his election as president of the Igbo State Union. Azikiwe said, "It would appear that the God of Africa has specially created the Igbo nation to lead the children of Africa from bondage of ages. The martial prowess of the Igbo nation at all stages of human history has enabled them not only to conquer others, but also to adapt themselves to the role of preserver. The Igbo nation cannot shirk its responsibility." British did a great work. They did a great work of dividing us, and this tribal something, they actually did a very, very great work to destroy us. But Azikiwe, where some people they see as hero, it was a complete tool in the hand of the British. Yeah. Let's continue again. Your heroes. When you begin to look at the real history, those they claim to be our heroes past, or villains, when you start looking at them, they are not what they told us they were. All of them. But let's continue. The South would never again be united under a simple political umbrella. Since then, But let us continue. Promoting unity in the North. The same British that planted the division in the South. Okay? They were promoting unity, but it's a different kind of unity they were promoting in the North. So let's continue. Promoting unity in the North. If Bodilon's handiwork is stirring up ethnic rivalry and political competition between the Igbos and the Yoruba, has to be inferred and deduced from events and circumstances. What it did to build political unity in the North and to play the thus united Northern team against the now divided South is a matter of written confession by the man on the ground who made it all happen, Sir Brian Sherwood Smith, the Lieutenant Governor of Northern Nigeria up to independence. In his 1970 memoir, But Always as Friends, Northern Nigeria and the Cameroons, 1921 to 1957, Sherwood Smith gives a comprehensive account of the evolution of the British relationship with the North, first as masters, then as leaders, finally as partners. He wrote, in the Britain of 1951, the northern region of Nigeria was little but a name. Nigeria, to the interested, was the Nigeria of the South with its eloquent political leaders, its clamant press, its academic links with the United Kingdom, its university graduates and its students' unions. The North, to the few who were aware of its existence, was still a stagnant backwater, quaintly feudal or incorrigibly archaic. According to the viewpoint of the individual, few in Britain seem to realize that in the crucible of nationalist politics, a new North had been born and that its leaders now faced the challenge to sow their hunting that they needed all the sympathy and encouragement they could get. For public opinion in Britain to refuse that sympathy, either out of ignorance or from political bigotry, seemed to us to be morally wrong. It would also be politically stupid. There were Muslim states and communities in other parts of Africa, Egypt for instance, whose attitude towards all we in Britain stood for was the reverse of friendly. Why make them a present of the goodwill? Now ours to help them further policies that would not at this stage benefit the people for whom we are still responsible. Why also risk Nigerian unity by antagonizing the more stable and more administratively experienced half of the country? The lessons from India in the aftermath of the First World War had been well learned. Not least that excluding the educated natives from the administration of the country was a policy with a limited shelf life. The only way to avoid the country coming under the control of the much feared and despised nationalists was to abandon the policy of screening the North from political interaction with the South. However, that policy, having been the orthodoxy for so long, special effort was going to be required, first to persuade the Northern leaders to buy into the need for engagement with the South, and beyond that, to avoid Southern rule, as had been done with Azikiwe and the Igbos. The plan was to fast-track the North preparation to meet the challenge by using the fear of the Southern domination as their spur to action. It was this policy that ultimately led to the military coup of 1966 and the Biafra War. The rousing of the North. As with this unity of the South, the real groundwork for the Bodilon plan for building unity in the North began in 1939, when the Barewa College Old Boys Association met in Kaduna and began to espouse the idea of one North. Also, Bodilon's biographer noted that his policy in the North took on a new urgency and directness as from 1942, as from 1942. So Bodlon's biographer wrote, Bodlon told his officers bluntly that the emirs would have to be democratized and a place found for educated Africans in northern native administration for the next few years were likely to be of supreme importance in the political history of this country. Bodlon had at last taken off the kid gloves he had been using since 1937. Why had he changed his attitude? And why indeed had he taken so long to do so? There are several answers. In suggesting answers to these questions, the biographer omitted the most important, which was that the timelines that Bodlon had been working to had to be radically shortened following the publication of the Atlantic Charter in August 1941 and the loss of Singapore and Malaya to the Japanese in the spring of 1942. These events, combined with the weakening grip on India, made the thinking on Nigeria more critical. The new note of urgency manifested in Bodlon's publication of a further memorandum on the future political development of Nigeria in October 1942, which followed a tour of the North that Bodlon embarked upon to solicit the views of the British colonial officers in the region about how the North could be effectively unified with the South without the nationalists taking control. It was about this time that Sir Bernard Bodlon went on tour in the North, invited senior administrative officers to set out, quite informally and with complete frankness, what their personal views were on the future political development of Nigeria. He especially wished to know what we thought could be done to break the isolationist attitude of the North and make it one with Nigeria as a whole. Among other points that he made was his conviction that it was high time that Nigerians were admitted to the administrative service. What would be the attitude of the chiefs to such a step? My own personal reaction to the general question, I remember, was that there was no point in arguing that the North and South were interdependently economically and politically. Still less was it any use telling the Northern chiefs and people that if they wanted to preserve their own traditional way of life, they must accept the South and learn to meet it on reasonable equal terms, instead of pretending that it did not exist. Logic had no part in the problem, nothing short of a biological shock, such as maybe the introduction of a few southern DOs would persuade them of the danger. Sir Bernard Bodlon's conclusion, formed as the result of these inquiries pursued throughout Nigeria, would pave the way to the major constitutional changes which would be introduced 2 years later by his successor, Sir Arthur Richards. And it was to be these changes, or rather the invasion of the North by southern politicians in reaction to them, that were to produce the biological shock that was so much needed. I still have, hang on, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 pages to go. And I have just 9 minutes. What do you think I should do? Should we just kind of like move it to tomorrow? Number one, we can't take any calls anymore. Or do you think I can read 9 pages in 9 minutes? Absolutely, absolutely not. I can't. Or else I will just be doing like that, right? So we won't be taking any calls, okay? We've been here for almost 3 hours. I've been reading for almost 3 hours. And that's like 100 and, okay, I currently have like 170 minutes. So let's move it to tomorrow so that I don't exhaust myself too much. So I can go get, Martinelli said we should continue. Okay, you know what we're going to do? I've got 8 minutes now, Okay, so I will read it. Now, you see, it's only like 8 pages. 8 pages to the end, right? So let me read it then and see what I do in 8 minutes. So here, Brian Sherwood Smith. What was intended to be the final solution to the problems of how to keep Nigeria out of the hands of the educated natives was a plan to groom and produce a new class of educated elites in the North, who would provide the essential link between Lugard's native authority system and the future national parliament. This new class, who were to bridge the past with the present, were the sons of the emirs and sultans. Since Barewa College had been established precisely for the purpose of promoting northern unity by educating the sons of the elite from across the North in the one school, the exercise was a relatively easy one. The one likely obstacle to the implementation of Bodilon's plan, Theodore Adams, had been taken care of with the award of a knighthood in 1942 before leaving Nigeria in March 1943, destined for retirement. The way was now clear for Brian Sherwood Smith to rouse the North for political engagement with the South. Although his father was a parson's son and his mother was the daughter of a vicar, the high point of Sherwood Smith's career was to be the strengthening of the Islamic North against the Christian South. After military service in the First World War in France and India, he chose to join the colonial service in preference to going to Cambridge, where he quickly moved from district officer to governor of northern Nigeria. Having arrived in Nigeria in January 1921, he only finally left the country in September 1957. Fluent in Hausa and with competent Fulani, he was the most trusted advisor of the northern political leadership. Sherwood Smith knew the thinking of the northern leaders that, left to themselves, they had no appetite for a united or unified Nigeria. That within a united Nigeria, their only concern was to protect what they had and to avoid domination by the more educated South. But that if the South was seen to be moving to threaten their isolation, they would be forced to react. The NCNC's fundraising rallies in the North ahead of his mission to London were just the opportunity that Sherwood Smith was looking to exploit. See, Southern politicians were to be heard for the first time in the marketplaces of the North, or at least in the marketplaces of those towns that had large settlements of Igbos and Yorubas and other Southern tribes. And the northern leaders were not to relish the experience, which more than anything else cured them of any surviving illusion that they could continue to ignore the world around them. All in all, the NCC delegation had done the North and the Nigeria as a whole a great service. The years of apathy were now ended. And though at the time, the contrary seemed the case, the road to a united Nigeria lay at last open. What remained was to put together the northern team that was to be played against the southern leaders. Sherwood Smith was responsible for the recruitment exercise. Ahmadu Bello. Ahmadu Bello's lineage traced directly back to the Fulani conquest of Hausa land, little more than a century before his birth in 1910. His great-grandfather, Sultan Bello, was one of the two sons of Uthman Danfodio, the leader of the Jihad. Just a few years before Bello's birth, the British had invaded and conquered the Sokoto Empire. His uncle, the Sarkin Muslimi, commander of the faithful of Sokoto, Muhammad Atahiru I, had been killed in battle after refusing to come under British rule. His successor, Muhammad Atahiru II, Atahiru II, was more amenable, and Bello was of similar persuasion. Whatever the rights and wrongs of the attack on Kano and Sokoto may be, the British were the instrument of destiny and were fulfilling the will of God. In their way, they did it well. Even at the actual time, there was no ill will after the occupation. Ahmadu Bello, as the descendant of those who had established the Fulani Empire within the Nigeria space, was an obvious choice as leader of the northern team. His father, who had worked as a district head in the system of native administration then, prevailing in the north, died when he was 6, but his upbringing was nevertheless comfortable within the extended family network. Schools on the Western models prevailing in the South being unknown then, in his village, preschool education took the conventional form of instruction in Arabic and the study of the Quran. At the age of 10, he went to secondary school before attending Barewa College to train as a teacher. A keen sportsman, he enjoyed the English pastimes of cricket and Eton fives. In common with others from the north, who emerged from the Barewa College, he started life as a teacher before, in 1934, being appointed district head of his home district of Rabba. Bello was a reluctant recruit to the Nigerian political scene. The death of the reigning sultan in 1938 had momentarily raised the prospect that he would fulfill his personal ambition of becoming the next sultan. Alas, the development coincided with the rollout of Baudouin's plan for the north, in which had been scripted to occupy a different office. Ever since the British conquest of the Sokoto Empire, although the responsibility for choosing the new sultan and emirs rested with the traditional selectors, their choice was subject to the veto of the chief representatives of the British government in the north, who at this time was Sherwood Smith. It was British who had, in fact, introduced the title Sultan, as they had done with the Alake in Egbaland, to establish a clear hierarchy within the community of chiefs. The two main candidates for the Sultanate were Bello and the Sardauna Abubakar, with Bello being the popular choice only for his selection to be trumped by British actions. According to the British, at this point, many apocryphal stories arise as to what happened. One of the most recurrent is that the selection council recommended Ahmadu. But when the decision was taken to the residents, John Carroll, he insisted that the succession as of right ought to go to the son of the Sultan. The council argued that Abubakar was not really the son of the Sultan, but his nephew. The resident replied with certainty that he had often heard the Sultan refer to Abubakar as his son, and that as his son, he was entitled to the succession. Abubakar III was selected as Sultan, and within a short period of time, his title of Sardauna is given to the runner-up, Ahmadu, who for all practical purposes then becomes known as Ahmadu, Sardauna of Sokoto. The British intervention changed the destiny of the two contenders. Abubakar would live a long life as Sultan, while Ahmadu Bello, the new Sardauna, would live a short, dramatic life as Premier of the North. As part of the preparation for his role, in 1948, the British Council arranged for him to visit England for a short course in local government. In contrast with the experience of the nationalists in the South who had to fend for themselves while abroad, arrangements had been put in place for him to stay in the home of an English family while attending the course. In several other respects, his path to his destiny was cleared for him by decisive interventions by Sherwood Smith. The personal relationship between Ahmadu Bello and the new Sultan, Abubakar, was never good and was worsened by the fact that one of the first acts of the new Sultan was to sentence Bello to a term of imprisonment for 1 year following a conviction by the Sultan's court on charges of embezzlement, which he was only spared from serving on appeal to the British. The hostile relationship between the two leaders meant that in steering Bello through to his appointed political destiny, Sherwood Smith often had to force the issue. See, reading just 3 pages alone took me about 11 minutes. So I don't want to overstretch it. So once I finish this next part, I'm going to actually hold it here. So we'll continue from Ahmadu Bello. Let's continue from Ahmadu Bello's entrance into the scene tomorrow. So thank you so much once again, everyone. It's another is it called another boring afternoon or morning? History can be boring, and at the same time, it can be very, very intriguing. So nostalgic as well. I'll leave you all to it. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon. I will see you later while we prepare for the evening. Thank you very much and enjoy your afternoon.
Mayegun làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Mayegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Mayegun làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Mayegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Mayegun ti dé o ọ̀rẹ́ ará ìlú.
Mayegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Lórí Facebook lórí YouTube.
Mayegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Gbogbo bó ṣe ń lọ ni Mayegun já wa sí.
Mayegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Àṣírí ọ̀jẹ̀lú kì í bò níbẹ̀ o.
Mayegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Bó bá ṣe eré àní Mayegun máa wí.
Mayegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Ó sì tún ṣe eré wàá gbọ́ níbẹ̀ o.
Mayegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Mayegun Diary politico.
Mayegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Godfatherism kò sí lọ́rọ̀ Mayegun.
Mayegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Ẹ farabalẹ̀ sẹ́ o kẹgọ́rọ̀ lẹ́nu o.
Mayegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Àní Mayegun làwa mọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Mayegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé. Mayegun ti dé.
Ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Lórí Facebook.
Mayegun ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Lórí YouTube.
Mayegun ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Bọ́ bàbá gbé wúrẹ́.
Mayegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Ijó ìgbádìyẹ.
Mayegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Presido bá rúfin o.
Mayegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Kí gómìnà kówó jẹ.
Mayegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Ọlọ́pàá tí ń gba rìbá.
Mayegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Aṣòfin tí ń rúfin o.
Mayegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Òpùrọ́ olóṣèlú.
Mayegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Máyégún ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Máyégún ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dèrò ní fi wọ́n níran o.
Máyégún ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Máyégún ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dèrò ní fi wọ́n níran.
Wọ́n fowó bẹ́ẹ̀ o Máyégún ó sọ pé wọ́n ò bẹ́ẹ̀. Wọ́n fowó bẹ́ẹ̀ Máyégún ó sọ pé wọ́n ò bẹ́ẹ̀. Oníkan ṣáàtì ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe fáwọn ará ìlú tó